13 oldest black R&B legends still with us today. Time does not erase legends. It hides them in quiet rooms, old tour buses, late-night interviews, and songs younger generations still sing without knowing whose pain first gave them life. They once stood under blinding lights, Motown suits, stacked stages, disco floors, gospel fire, and R&B royalty. But behind the applause were illnesses, betrayals, lost contracts, lonely hotel rooms, and truths the industry buried beneath polished smiles. Today on Black Hollywood Uncut, we're pulling back the curtain on 13 of the oldest black R&B legends still with us today. Stay until the very last second. Subscribe to Black Hollywood Uncut and hit the notification bell, because these final stories prove survival can be even more haunting than death. Stevie Wonder, 76 age, now Stevie Wonder, was never just a man who could not see. He became the artist who made the whole world listen differently. Born Stevland Hardaway Judkins in Saginaw, Michigan, he lost his sight shortly after birth, but what the world tried to call limitation became part of his legend. By childhood, he was already mastering instruments, hearing colors in sound, and turning silence into melody. At just 11, Wonder signed with Motown's Thelma label, entering the same black music machine that shaped generations of soul, R&B, and pop. He was marketed first as Little Stevie Wonder, a child prodigy with a harmonica and a voice too powerful for his age. But as he grew, he refused to remain a novelty act. He wanted control. He wanted depth. He wanted to write music that carried the weight of love, politics, faith, and black survival. The 1970s became his kingdom. Albums like Talking Book, Inner Visions, Fulfillingness First Finale, and Songs in the Key of Life did more than make hits. They changed the architecture of modern music. Superstition burned with funk. Living for the City exposed racial injustice. Isn't She Lovely turned family love into something eternal. Stevie was not simply performing songs, he was building worlds. But even genius carried danger. In 1973, a serious car accident left him in a coma for several days and threatened the future of a man still in his early 20s. Public accounts say he survived with lasting effects, including partial loss of smell. Yet instead of disappearing, Wonder came back deeper, more spiritual, and more determined to turn pain into purpose. Now at 76, Stevie Wonder stands as one of the most decorated and influential artists in American history, with 25 Grammy Awards and a legacy that reaches far beyond entertainment. His story belongs here, because he reminds us that black music is not just sound. It is memory, protest, prayer, and survival. Stevie may not see the world the way others do, but for more than 6 decades, he has shown the world what it refused to see in itself. Tina Turner, die age 83, in 2023. Tina Turner's story was never just about fame. It was about escape. Born Anna Mae Bullock in Tennessee, she came out of the church, the South, and the raw fire of rhythm and blues, with a voice that sounded like survival before the world even knew what she had survived. When she stepped on stage, she did not simply sing. She attacked the song, shook the room, and made pain sound powerful. Her rise with Ike Turner brought her into the spotlight. But behind the explosive performances was a private world marked by control, fear, and abuse. Tina later spoke openly about the violence she endured in that marriage, and those revelations changed the way many fans understood her music. The woman who made crowds scream was also fighting to stay alive behind closed doors. That is why her story still feels so heavy. The stage was bright, but the cost was brutal. When Tina finally left, she did not walk away with comfort or certainty. She had to rebuild almost from nothing, carrying only her voice, her discipline, and the belief that her life was not over. Then came one of the greatest comebacks in music history. Private Dancer turned her into a global solo icon. What's Love Got to Do with It became more than a hit. It became a declaration that Tina Turner belonged to herself. In later years, Tina chose peace in Switzerland, away from the constant glare of American celebrity. Her final chapter included serious health struggles, including a stroke, cancer, kidney failure, and a transplant before her death in 2023, at the age of 83. But Tina Turner did not leave this world as a victim. She left as a mountain, scarred, standing, and impossible to move. Her legacy lives in every black woman who was told to stay quiet and chose to roar instead. She turned survival into sound, and that sound will never die. Smokey Robinson, 86. Age now. Smokey Robinson is the kind of artist whose pain never needed to shout. It slipped through melody, through velvet harmonies, through lyrics so smooth that people sometimes missed how lonely they really were. Born William Robinson Jr. in Detroit, he became one of Motown's most important architects, singer, songwriter, producer, and frontman of the Miracles. If Berry Gordy built the Motown machine, Smokey helped give it a heart, with songs like The Tracks of My Tears, Ooh Baby Baby, and The Tears of a Clown. Smokey turned heartbreak into poetry. His writing did not just describe sadness. It dressed sadness in elegance. He gave black music a language of longing that could move from street corners to ballrooms, from radio speakers to memory. And behind that gift was a man who understood how to make vulnerability sound timeless. But the transcript's darker image of Smokey wandering through destruction should be handled with care. What is publicly documented is that Robinson has spoken about cocaine addiction during a painful period after the breakup of his marriage and the death of his father. In 1989, reports covered his own admission that drugs had taken hold during that chapter of his life. That struggle did not erase his genius. It revealed the human being behind it. Smokey was not only the polished Motown poet with perfect phrasing and a soft smile. He was also a man who had to confront the kind of emptiness that fame cannot fix. The applause was still there. The catalog was still immortal. But survival required something deeper than applause. At 86, Smokey Robinson remains one of the living pillars of American soul. He was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, honored with the Library of Congress Gershwin Prize, and remains celebrated as one of the great songwriters of popular music. His story belongs here because it proves that legends are not made of marble. They bleed, they fall, they recover, and sometimes they keep singing so the rest of us can understand our own broken hearts. Gladys Knight, 82. Age now. Gladys Knight did not earn the title Empress of Soul by accident. She earned it through a voice that could carry tenderness, heartbreak, gospel fire, and quiet authority, all in the same breath. Born in Atlanta, Georgia, she began singing as a child, long before the world understood that her gift would become one of the defining sounds of Black American music. With Gladys Knight and the Pips, she turned family harmony into something elegant, disciplined, and unforgettable. By the 1960s and 1970s, Gladys was no longer just another powerful vocalist. She was a force. Songs like Midnight Train to Georgia, Neither One of Us, and If I Were Your Woman did not simply climb charts. They became emotional landmarks. Her voice sounded like someone who had loved deeply, lost quietly, and still found the strength to stand tall. That is why audiences believed her. Gladys did not perform pain from a distance. She made it feel lived in. But even a queen can carry wounds the crowd never sees. The transcript presents her life as a story of betrayal, financial struggle, and private battles behind the throne. Those claims should be handled carefully, unless supported by clear records. What can be said with respect is that Gladys lived through the difficult side of fame. Marriages ending, personal pressure, industry expectations, and the challenge of protecting her name in a business that often profits from Black women, while asking them to remain graceful under stress. Her greatness lies in how she kept moving, through changing eras, shifting sounds, and a music industry that often pushed older women aside. Gladys remained regal. She sang gospel, soul, pop, and R&B with the same emotional weight. She became more than a hitmaker. She became a symbol of endurance. At 82, Gladys Knight stands as one of the living monuments of soul music. Her story belongs here because she reminds us that Black excellence is not only about applause, it is about surviving the cost of being excellent, then walking back on stage with dignity still intact. Patti LaBelle, 82 age. Now Patti LaBelle has always sounded like fire, learning how to pray. Her voice does not simply rise. It breaks open the room. Born Patricia Louise Holty in Philadelphia, she grew from church-rooted beginnings into one of the most powerful voices in soul. R&B, gospel, and pop. Before she became a solo legend, she led LaBelle into history, helping create a sound and image that was bold, futuristic, feminine, and impossible to ignore. With Lady Marmalade, Patti and LaBelle gave the world more than a hit. They gave black women a new kind of stage power, glamorous, strange, fearless, and free. Patti's voice could scream, whisper, testify, and comfort. She was not polished into softness for anyone's comfort. She made emotion big, dramatic, and alive. That is why fans did not just listen to her. They felt her. But behind that thunder was a woman who knew grief intimately. Patti has publicly spoken over the years about devastating personal losses, including losing close family members to cancer. That kind of grief changes a person. It can make the applause feel distant, even when the room is full. The transcript paints her as a lonely queen behind the curtain, and while some of those details should not be treated as fact, the emotional truth is believable. Even the strongest voices can belong to people carrying private sorrow. What makes Patti's story powerful is that she never let sorrow shrink her. She kept singing. She kept touring. She crossed genres, built a career in food, television, books, and performance, and became a cultural presence far beyond the recording studio. Patti LaBelle is not remembered only because she could hit impossible notes. She is remembered because she made every note feel like a confession. At 82, Patti remains a living emblem of survival, style, and soul. Her story fits this journey because it shows the other side of greatness. The public hears the roar, but behind it is a woman who endured loss, pressure, and reinvention, and still chose to give the world a voice big enough to hold its pain. Dionne Warwick, 85 age. Now, Dionne Warwick's voice has always sounded like elegance hiding a bruise. Born Marie Dionne Warwick in New Jersey, she came out of a gospel-rooted family and entered American music with a tone so smooth it almost disguised how much longing lived inside it. She did not sing pain like a scream. She sang it like a secret, being placed gently on the table. Her partnership with Burt Bacharach and Hal David turned her into one of the most distinctive voices of the 1960s and beyond. Songs like Walk On By, Anyone Who Had a Heart, I Say a Little Prayer, and Do You Know the Way to San Jose became more than pop hits. They became emotional architecture, polished, sophisticated, and quietly devastating. Dionne made heartbreak sound expensive, controlled, and painfully human. But behind the glamour was a career filled with reinvention, pressure, and public misunderstanding. The transcript leans into her Psychic Friends Network chapter as if it were a mystical scandal, but that part should be handled carefully. What is true is that Dionne became associated with the network in the 1990s and faced criticism for it. Yet reducing her to that moment would be unfair. Her career had already reshaped pop, soul, and adult contemporary music long before television controversy entered the picture. Dionne Warwick also carried the burden of being a black female artist, expected to remain graceful under every kind of scrutiny. She moved through changing eras, shifting labels, financial challenges, and a public that sometimes remembered the jokes more loudly than the genius. But she never disappeared. She adapted. She kept performing. She returned to public conversation with wit, dignity, and a voice that still carries history. At 85, Dionne Warwick stands as one of the great interpreters of American song. Her story belongs here because she represents survival through elegance. She was not the loudest soul singer, and she never needed to be. Dionne's power was restraint, the ability to make one soft phrase feel like an entire lifetime of love, disappointment, and endurance. Mavis Staples, 86. Age, now. Mavis Staples does not sound like she came from show business. She sounds like she came from the church, the road, the march, and the front line of history. Born in Chicago and raised inside a family group that became one of America's most important gospel soul acts, Mavis grew into the unmistakable voice of the staple singers. Deep, warm, grounded, and impossible to fake. Her music was never just entertainment. With her father, Pop Staples, and her family beside her, Mavis helped carry songs that moved through the civil rights era like spiritual armor. The staple singers were connected to the movement, to the church, and to the promise of freedom. Songs like I'll Take You There and Respect Yourself did not simply ask people to dance. They asked people to stand taller. That kind of voice comes with a cost. The transcript presents Mavis as a woman punished for being too political, too faithful, and too honest. Some of those details should not be stated as fact without strong sources, but the larger truth is clear. Mavis Staples belonged to a generation of black artists whose music could not be separated from the struggle for dignity. When she sang, she carried joy, but she also carried history. Unlike some legends who faded into silence, Mavis kept evolving. She worked with new generations of musicians, released late-career albums, toured into her later years, and remained a living bridge between gospel roots, soul music, protest music, and modern Americana. She never had to chase trends. Her voice already contained something deeper than fashion. At 86, Mavis Staples stands as a survivor of a sacred musical lineage. Her story belongs in this journey because she reminds us that black music is not only about fame. It is testimony. It is memory. It is resistance wrapped in harmony. Mavis is not simply a singer from another era. She is one of the last living flames from a time when a song could walk beside a movement and make frightened people feel brave. Otis Williams, 84, age now. Otis Williams is the last soldier still standing from one of Motown's most legendary vocal groups. As the founder and sole surviving original member of the Temptations, he carries more than a name. He carries a graveyard of memories. Voices that once harmonized beside him, footsteps that once moved in perfect formation, and brothers whose songs became immortal while their lives ended far too soon. Born Otis Miles Jr. in Texas and raised into the sound of Detroit, Williams helped form a group that would become one of the defining forces in black music. The Temptations did not simply sing. They moved like silk, dressed like royalty, and turned heartbreak into choreography. My Girl, Ain't Too Proud to Beg, Papa Was a Rollin' Stone, and Just My Imagination became songs that crossed generations, carrying the polish of Motown and the ache of real life. But Otis's story was never about being the loudest voice. He was the keeper, the organizer, the man who stayed when others left, fell ill, or died. The transcript paints him as a lonely guardian, walking through a corridor of ghosts, and while the more cinematic details should be treated carefully, the emotional truth is clear. Otis has lived long enough to see nearly every original brother in the group become memory. As of recent reporting, Williams remains the only original Temptation still with the group, which continues to perform with newer members more than 6 decades after its formation. That kind of endurance is not simple nostalgia. It is labor. It is discipline. It is the burden of standing on stage while history stands behind you. At 84, Otis Williams represents survival in its quietest form. His legacy is not only in the hits, it is in preservation. He reminds us that some legends do not burn brightest in the center. Some stay alive long enough to make sure the song is not buried with the men who first sang it. Thelma Houston, 80 age. Now, Thelma Houston's voice once exploded through the disco era. Like a cry under the glitter, "Don't Leave Me This Way," was not just a dance floor anthem. It was desperation, dressed in rhythm. A song that made heartbreak move, sweat, and shine beneath the colored lights. With that record, Thelma became one of the defining black female voices of disco, turning longing into something people could dance through. Born in Mississippi and raised through gospel-rooted beginnings, Thelma came into music with more than a pretty voice. She carried church, soul, and survival. Before the disco spotlight fully found her, she had already worked through the kind of industry that often demanded black women be powerful, polished, and replaceable at the same time. When her version of "Don't Leave Me This Way" became a #1 hit and won a Grammy, it looked like the world had finally opened its arms. But disco fame could be cruel. The same sound that made stars overnight became a target when the industry turned against disco at the end of the 1970s. The transcript presents Thelma as a forgotten goddess, pushed aside by changing taste. And that theme feels true even if the dramatic backstage scenes should not be treated as verified fact. Many disco artists, especially black women, watched the marketplace move on while their voices remained frozen inside one era. Thelma did not disappear. She kept performing, kept showing up, and kept proving that her artistry was bigger than one hit. Recent appearances have continued to celebrate the long life of Don't Leave Me This Way, including anniversary performances that show how deeply the song still lives in the culture. At 80, Thelma Houston stands as more than a disco survivor. She is a reminder that Black women helped build the emotional heart of dance music. The lights may have changed, the industry may have shifted, but her voice still carries that old command: do not leave me this way, and do not forget who made you dance. Candi Staton, 86. Age now. Candi Staton's voice has always carried the sound of a woman who survived love the hard way. Born in Alabama, she came out of gospel, Southern soul, and the kind of life experience that cannot be manufactured in a studio. When she sang Young Hearts Run Free, it sounded like advice from someone who had seen the damage behind romance, glamour, and promises that turned into cages. Her career moved through gospel, soul, disco, and dance music, but the emotional center never changed. Candi did not sing like someone chasing trends. She sang like someone testifying. Her voice could be warm one moment and wounded the next, turning personal pain into something millions of listeners could recognize. That is why her songs stayed alive. They were not just records. They were warnings, prayers, and survival notes for people who loved too deeply and paid too much. The transcript leans heavily into her marriages, private heartbreak, and health rumors. But those details should be handled carefully. What can be said safely is that Candi Staton's life has included public struggles, complicated relationships, and a long road through both secular success and gospel redemption. She has spoken over the years about hardship, faith, and resilience, but her story should not be reduced to scandal or romantic failure. What makes Candi powerful is not how many times life knocked her down. It is how many times she returned with a voice still intact. In the 1970s, she became a soul and disco force. Later, You Got the Love introduced her to new generations, proving that her voice could travel across decades, clubs, churches, and heartbreaks without losing its authority. At 86, Candi Staton stands as one of the great survivors of Southern soul. Her story belongs here because she represents the women who sang through disappointment without letting disappointment define them. She reminds us that love can wound, fame can fade, and the industry can move on. But a voice rooted in truth can still rise, even after the room has gone quiet. William Bell, 86 age. Now William Bell is one of the quiet architects of Southern soul, a man whose voice never needed to shout to leave a mark. Born in Memphis, he became part of the Stax Records universe, where gospel feeling, blues pain, and Black working-class truth came together in a sound that changed American music. While louder names often took the spotlight, Bell carried something deeper: restraint, elegance, and a sadness that stayed with you after the song ended. His classic, You Don't Miss Your Water, became one of the great soul ballads, not because it begged for attention, but because it understood regret. Bell sang like a man speaking from the edge of memory. Every phrase felt measured. Every pause felt earned. In a label known for fire, sweat, and explosive stage energy, William Bell gave Stax a different kind of power, the sound of a heart trying not to break in public. The transcript presents him as a secret keeper of Memphis, carrying hidden contracts and buried truths about the record business. That kind of language is dramatic, but it should not be stated as fact without strong documentation. The safer truth is still compelling. Bell came from an industry where Black artists often had to fight for credit, royalties, control, and respect. The soul music business created immortal records, but it did not always protect the people who made them. William Bell's journey also proves that recognition can come late. After decades of work, he received renewed attention and won a Grammy for his 2016 album, This Is Where I Live, a powerful reminder that true artistry does not expire just because the mainstream looks away. His voice aged, but it did not weaken. It gained weight, memory, and authority. At 86, William Bell stands as a living bridge to Stax history. His story belongs in this journey because he represents the artists who helped build soul music from the inside. Not always the loudest, not always the most mythologized, but essential. He is proof that some legends do not vanish. They wait for the world to finally listen closely. Bettye LaVette, 80 age. Now, Bettye LaVette is the kind of singer who sounds like she had to fight every decade just to keep her voice from being buried. Born in Michigan, she made her first record as a teenager in the early 1960s, entering the soul world with a voice that was not sweet in the ordinary way. It was rough, wounded, stubborn, and alive. She did not smooth out pain for radio. She dragged it into the light. For years, Bettye lived inside one of music's cruelest spaces, respected by people who knew, but overlooked by the larger public. She had records, talent, and fire, but the industry never seemed to give her the kind of sustained push that turns a singer into a household name. The transcript paints her as a woman time-stabbed in the back, and that image fits the emotional truth. Even if some cinematic details should be treated carefully, her late recognition became part of her legend. In 2008, after decades in the business, she stunned audiences at the Kennedy Center Honors with her performance of Love Reign O'er Me during a tribute to The Who. Many viewers were suddenly asking the question soul insiders had been asking for years. How had a voice this powerful been overlooked for so long? But Bettye LaVette's story is not just about being rediscovered. It is about endurance without apology. She became proof that a black woman's artistry does not expire because the industry fails to market it. Her voice aged into something even more dangerous, less polished, more truthful, carrying every locked door, every missed chance, every night she kept singing when nobody promised applause. At 80, Bettye LaVette stands as a survivor of the soul era's unfinished business. She reminds us that some legends do not arrive with fireworks. Some wait in the shadows for decades, holding the song like evidence. And when the world finally listens, it does not sound like a comeback. It sounds like justice arriving late. Mabel John, die, age 91, in 2022. Mabel John was not just another name in the early history of soul. She was one of the doors that opened before the world fully understood what Motown and Stax would become. Born in Louisiana in 1930, she carried blues, gospel, and Southern strength in her voice. Long before the glossy mythology of Motown hardened into history, Mabel was already there, a black woman standing near the beginning of a revolution that would change American music. Public records identify Mabel John as the first female artist Berry Gordy signed to Motown's Thelma label. Later, she recorded for Stax and became connected to Ray Charles as the lead singer of the Raelettes, placing her at the crossroads of some of the most important black music institutions of the 20th century. But being first did not mean being remembered first. That is the ache in Mabel's story. The transcript presents her as a woman hidden by Motown, and while its more sensational claims should be avoided, the larger point is powerful. Early black women in the music business often helped build the foundation, then watched history celebrate louder names. Mabel's work mattered, but the spotlight moved quickly, and the industry rarely paused to protect the women who stood at the beginning. Her later life gave her story another kind of meaning. She became Dr. Mabel John, a minister and community figure, carrying her voice from the stage into service. That transition matters. It shows a woman who refused to let the record business define the full size of her life. Music was part of her calling, but not the whole of it. Mabel John died in Los Angeles on August 25, 2022, at the age of 91. Her legacy should not be treated as a footnote. She was a first chapter, a witness, and a survivor of an era when black women gave music its soul, while history often gave them silence. In the golden age of R&B, soul, Motown, and disco, many legends were taught to hide their wounds behind perfect notes. Fear, stigma, racism, ageism, and industry pressure made them suffer quietly, smiling for cameras, while contracts, illness, loneliness, and betrayal waited behind the curtain. But pain was never the whole story. These artists gave black culture some of its deepest melodies, boldest performances, and most unforgettable voices. Their genius outlived bad deals, fading charts, and the silence of people who should have protected them. Their music still breathes, still heals, and still refuses to be forgotten. So which living legend deserves more flowers while they can still receive them? Stevie, Smokey, Gladys, Patti, Dionne, Mavis, or someone else on this list? Drop your thoughts below, like this video, subscribe to Black Hollywood Uncut, and hit the notification bell for more unvarnished stories.